Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shannon Show. As you saw in those disclaimers, this is not my usual posting schedule. If you're not new here and you've been keeping up with my February videos, welcome back. If you're new here, this is, like I said, this is not my normal posting schedule. Usually I post on Fridays at about 12 o'clock noon Pacific time. However, I wanted to try something a little bit different for February to see if there was a better day of the week that works for posting. So that's why I did this. But to jump right into this video, also, yes, I am wearing a Christmas shirt, but White Christmas doesn't fully count since the majority of the movie doesn't take place at Christmas. I mean, it counts as a Christmas movie because that's the main point of the movie, it's the White Christmas. But anyway. And plus, I'm still in early January when I'm recording this, so I'm stretching out my Christmas shirts a little bit longer. Anyway, like I was saying, to get into the point of this video, we are going to end the audiobooks aren't reading discussion, because this is something that just keeps coming up. And will this video end the audiobooks aren't reading discussion? Probably not, but hopefully we can add to the they are reading discussion when we can add this to the audiobooks are reading side of the argument. And before you get into the like blind people read through Braille, do you know how expensive it is to manufacture a Braille book? Let's look at it real quick. Do I have it in any of these? Okay, I don't think I have it in any. Is it in this one? Oh, okay, it is in this one. So you can just look up how much it costs to print a Braille book. I do have one link from the Braille Library and Transcribing Services Inc. Down below in the description. So looking at that one, as of January 2016, oh, okay, that's not important for our video, but Braille per Braille page, individuals 25 cents per page with a $5 minimum. So that is about 20 pages minimum. So $5 for 20 pages. It might not seem like a lot, but it can add up, especially for books that are 500 plus pages. So nonprofits and schools do 25 cents, and worksheets and previously, okay, so 25 cents for worksheets and previously transcribed books, 75 cents for new books to transcribe. Okay, Nemeth, I'm not quite sure what that is, but and textbooks are 75 cents per page. So it does cost less for individuals, but it can, like I said, it can add up, like 25 cents per page. And it's a 5-page minimum, so that's about before. Wait, no. Yeah, so that's about 20 pages for $5. Let's see, 0.25. Okay, so per page, so 4 would be $1. Okay, 500 divided by 4. Math is not mathing right now. 4 I don't know. My math's not mathing, but you can kind of figure that out. Like if a book costs 25 cents per page, does it for 500 pages. Let's see if... Okay, so it would be about $125. So again, not bad, but when you have to do 10 books that are that length, 20 books, 30 books, it adds up. And sadly, we are in a situation where, or we are in a society, not a situation, but we are in a society where they are going to try to pay as little as possible to, not that they're not paying, not that they're underpaying anyone, but they're going to try to avoid as many costs as possible to keep their profits up. So for bindings and covers per volume, so cardboard and green would be $3, plastic blue $4, just binding no cover 25 cents. And then it's $50 cents per sheet of embossals. What's an embossal? Embossable. So when it's able to be embossed. Okay. I was just reading it as embossal, so I wasn't sure what that was. So, yeah, it can add up. Again, if you have like 50 books that are $125 each to... Wait. So 500 page book is $125 to do in Braille, roughly, based on the Braille library and transcribing services. So if you have 500 books, okay, so let's start off with 50 books. That's about 6,250. But if you have 125 times, let's say 500, because usually you're going to be printing a lot based on expectations. So that's 62,500. So you see what I mean, where like it adds up, and publishing companies are going to go with the path of most profit for them based on whatever contracts that they have. They're going to go on the path of most contract for them, profit for them. And usually that means not doing Braille. So Braille, I feel like the Braille argument is pretty weak based on pricing. And again, it doesn't sound like a lot, like 25 cents per page. Roughly, it does not sound like a whole lot, but it adds up, and that's something that publishing companies look at. And sadly, that is not a situation where they're going to be doing that. And there's a Reddit thread. I'm not going to go over this Reddit thread too much, but it's fewer people are learning Braille in North America. And it's a link to an article of that title, basically saying how fewer people are learning Braille. Low vision to blind people are not learning as much Braille. And that is because of the reason that this article gives is that it's because of technology and video magnifiers and text-to-speech, which, yes, I think is part of it. But there's one comment, this is from like about 7 years ago. There's one comment that says, unfortunately, it's also much cheaper for a school to set up low vision students with a video magnifier than it is to hire teachers capable of teaching Braille and produce Braille materials for the student. And on top of that, the stigma of Braille being for very blind people, and a lot of students and parents are discouraged from ever learning. Sorry, I felt a cough coming on, so I was trying to stop recording before I coughed. But basically, like I said, it's very expensive to produce and manufacture Braille, and then it's also expensive because it's expensive to produce and manufacture it. It gets expensive to teach it because they need the materials to teach it, and then also with blindness, there's varying levels of blindness. Like, an example I like to give is when I was little, I wasn't blind. I don't think I was ever legally blind. Maybe I was when I was little. I don't know. I'd have to talk to my, is it optometrist? I'd have to talk to my eye doctor about that. But when I was little, I could see when I was little, but when I'd be out on the playground and playing and running around on the playground, I wouldn't see other kids until I bumped into them. And like I could see the stuff around me, and I had to have like patches on both of my eyes. So there's varying levels of sight, and there's varying levels of blindness. So it's like you can't tell all people with vision issues or with low vision to just read Braille when Braille is expensive and they can kind of see their phone or see a part of their phone and have their phone read it out. Excuse me, I couldn't catch it in time for that one. Or it's like you can't tell them to just do Braille when they can have their phone read it out to them, or have their phone have their font size be larger and zoom it in. So yes, part of it is technology, but also part of it is cost of producing Braille on a higher scale. If it was cheaper to do, I think it should be cheaper to manufacture and produce Braille so that kids who do have vision difficulties can have access to reading, especially if their vision doesn't improve. Like, thankfully mine did improve. My vision still isn't great. I have to wear contacts still. But for people whose vision doesn't improve, like, I do think that Braille should be more accessible and more widely taught. But again, we are in a capitalistic consumerism society, so that's not going to happen. So looking at the other link, Seedlings, and this is Braille books for children. So if, like, I am trying to share more about Braille here because, like, I do think it needs to be more widely accessible. And basically, so in this, I've linked the FAQ section just to talk about it a little bit. But the first question, and this is how I found it, but the first question is Seedlings a nonprofit organization? Why? It is a nonprofit organization. Nonprofit status was secured in 1984, which allowed Seedlings to expand its reach and secure donations to subsidize the cost of book production. Braille books are very expensive to produce, but with the help of grants and donations, they are able to make their Braille books available at a much reduced cost, on an average about $10 per book, and provide a variety of free Braille book programs. But they are able to do that, like I mentioned, because of the grants and donations. Most publishers are not getting grants and donations to publish Braille books. And like that's where like the blind people read Braille discussion kind of falls through, because it is so expensive to publish Braille books. I gave that one example where it's like, it doesn't seem like a lot, but like I mentioned, it adds up. So that's where for me it falls through. And audiobooks are just far more accessible, especially if you consider apps like that I've talked about, like Libby and Hoopla and Overdrive, where those are from libraries and you can loan ebooks and audiobooks. Audiobooks being far more accessible than ebooks. And then sadly with like Audible, although I'm trying to veer away from Amazon, Audible, and then I think Kindle has like a text to speech, and then there's Libro FM. There's other ebook sites that I think do text to speech as well. So yes, a large part of why Braille is declining is because of the technology available, but it's also kind of in, is synchronicity the right word? Synchronicity. I think it is. I didn't want the book by Carl Jung. Definition. Yeah, it is the right word, synchronicity. So it's in synchronicity. It's in sync with the fact that publishers are not going to be spending money to publish Braille books, especially when they're already spending money on getting audiobooks produced, getting the books formatted in ebook and in physical book format, getting it formatted in hardback versus paperback, getting it formatted for audiobook narrators. So it's like they're not going to be spending more money and also paying audiobook narrators. They're not going to be spending more money to publish Braille when they already spend money on the more accessible formats. So that's where it falls through for me. And just backing away from the blind part of the discussion, before I actually back off from it, one last point. I do think it's valid to note that a lot of blind people have used Braille to read, but at this day and age, with so many other things accessible, and like I said, with Braille being so expensive to produce, we're at a point where, like I said, that argument holds very little water because of publishing companies' unwillingness to produce Braille, to print out Braille books. And there would be like certain techniques in manufacturing for it, but it's like you see where that discussion starts to lose a little bit of its ground in 2025. So backing away from the blind discussion part, the blind portion part of the discussion. Now, there is a YouTuber I follow. I watch a lot of her videos, and in one of her videos, she mentioned how audiobooks just do not work for her. But she also acknowledged that she's not in a position to tell other people that audiobooks can't count for them, can't count towards their reading goals, which I think is the approach that we all need to take. And for me, I tend to use audiobooks a lot, and they work for me. But lately, I'm kind of starting to realize that ebooks don't work for me, especially not in the way they used to work for me. So it's like, okay, ebooks don't work for me, so I'm not going to be reading ebooks, and I'm not going to turn around and tell the next person that you only have to read. It only counts as reading if you read a physical book. It only counts as reading if you're picking up the physical book and turning the physical pages. I'm not going to tell someone that it only counts then, especially because I read audiobooks. But I'm not going to diminish one format just because I don't use that format. And at the end of the day, if a format doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. But that doesn't mean you discount that format to other people and that you try to take that away from them because it might be an accessibility thing. Maybe they're not near any physical bookstores. Maybe they have a physical limitation. Limitation's not the right word, but maybe there's something that makes it harder for them to hold up a physical book or to hold up an e-reader and being able to I'm using my phone to record, but I was looking for my phone, but being able to, let's pretend this is my phone, this is my Bluetooth mouse. Let's say, like I was saying, it's harder for them to pick up a physical book and turn the pages, or to hold up an e-reader of some sort, whether it's a phone, tablets, or like an actual e-reader like a Kindle or a Nook or a Kobo. So let's say it's hard for them to pick up that and flip through the pages. Sometimes it is a lot easier, even if you can do that. Sometimes it's a lot easier to pick up your phone, go to the audiobook app, plug in some headphones, put the phone in your pocket or set it on the table, and just listen. You can get other work done at the same time. You can get chores done. And yes, you're not taking in the information in the same way, but you are still taking in the same information. And our ancestors, before printing was invented and before we really started writing stuff down, stories were told orally. And at the end of the day, it's like you're still taking in the story if you're listening to it in an audiobook format. You're still taking in the details if you're listening to it in an audiobook format. You're still listening to the same story. And if they're able to hold a conversation with you about the book and talk about key points, like, okay, I read The Bog Queen recently by Anna North, and it's like, okay, I can tell you X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to go into full detail because that would be spoilers, but I can tell you that the one character who is the anthropologist had to tell one of the characters that the body wasn't the family member. And I can also tell you that in the older timeline that you have the druid and she's going to meet the king. Like, if someone could hold you, or not hold you, I have to turn my ring light on, off, sadly. If someone could hold a conversation with you about the book from essentially from cover to cover, from the story start to story end, then it does not matter how they read it. Format aside, let's say you both say like, oh, I read this book, and then you start talking about it and you're able to talk about the full thing, all the details, all the little twists and turns, all the little plot points and character developments and character arcs, and then at the end you say like, oh, like I read the physical book, and then you say like, oh, I read the audiobook, I listened to the audiobook. It's about semantics here, because you can't get on their case, especially after a full-blown conversation. You can't get on their case about audiobooks don't count as reading when they were just able to hold up a full conversation about that same book and the same information and the same material and give you their thoughts and opinions about it. And sometimes, yeah, like I can't retain all the information in a book, in an audiobook, but sometimes I can't retain all the information from a physical book. So it's not the format, it's just how much you're paying attention to it and how much you're actually taking in the information. Because sometimes, like I've talked about it on my channel before, like I played The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and also now the Phantom Tollbooth, I play those when I'm going to sleep. But I'm also not counting those as reading because I'm falling asleep to them. But I also know those stories very well. I read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings once a year, and then I read The Phantom Tollbooth a lot when I was little, and I still really love it. So it's like, I know those stories. So I have no problem like falling asleep to them. But I can hold a conversation with you about The Phantom Tollbooth and not have an issue going over like, okay, Milo stopped at the doldrums because he wasn't thinking. Milo went to Dictionopolis and met with the cabinet, and they were all talking about like the different definitions of stuff. And then X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to go over too much because I realized it might get a little spoilery, even though the book's been out for a while, a long while. But it's one of those things where I could hold a conversation with you about it, but you wouldn't know unless you had asked me, and even then I could still hold a conversation. It doesn't matter what format it is. I could still hold a conversation with you about it. Okay, this is what the movie did. This is what I didn't like about the movie. I could hold these conversations about The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit very well. I don't remember the Phantom Tollbooth movie too much, so I can't hold a conversation about how the book and the movie compare. But I could tell you, okay, I don't like how the Hobbit trilogy was split into 3 movies. I do like the 3 movies. I don't like how they created a whole new character in Tario, but then ended up using her in a stupid-ass love triangle when she was a very powerful character and had the potential to be a very powerful character. I don't like what they're doing with Galadriel and Rings of Power. I didn't like how... Oh, what else didn't I like? The Hobbit. The thing is, with The Hobbit, The Hobbit does get a little bit tricky when you're talking about the Peter Jackson movies, just because they're so long. You have 3 pretty long movies for one short book. So it gets a little bit tricky. So it's like, those are some things I can tell you about. Like, okay, Tario wasn't a real character, and Elrond has a very minor role in the book, and a lot of the stuff that's in the Peter Jackson movies for the Hobbits are actually revealed in Lord of the Rings. Like, it was talked about, like, okay, the White Council, like, discovered the Necromancer and Dol Guldur, and that's why Gandalf left the company. You learn that in Lord of the Rings. And then his dog, he's like a very minor character in the book, like mentioned very briefly. So it's like, I could talk about a lot of the stuff that I don't like with The Lord of the Rings. Like, they cut out Tom Bombadil. I love Tom Bombadil's character, and Goldberry. I love their characters. They cut out Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, and then Smeagol's thing, like, that was all in the appendices, so it wasn't in the actual novels for The Lord of the Rings, the actual books. And then, what else is there for The Lord of the Rings? There's so much. Also, Saruman doesn't die in Isengard, he dies in the Shire. That was spoilers, sorry. I'm not gonna say more. So, it's that kind of a deal where if you can hold a conversation with a person about the book, it does not matter how they absorb the information. And like I said earlier, it's okay if you do not want to count audiobooks as reading. It's okay if you do not want to do that. But what you can't do is just try to push that onto other people by saying you can't count it as a reading because I don't count it as reading. You don't know what their situation is, and even if they're perfectly healthy and able-bodied, you don't know what their schedule is like. And even if you do, you can't know every single thing about a person and why they're choosing to read audiobooks. And yes, like I said earlier, it is semantics, reading versus listening. But again, you are just absorbing the same information. And in a way, I think audiobooks are absorbing it better because narrators are often in conversation. Audiobook narrators are often in conversation with the author to some extent as to like, okay, is this scene, like, am I saying it right? Like, this one bit of dialogue or this one bit of prose, am I saying it with the right intonations? It's that kind of deal. So the author will, if the author isn't narrating it, they will guide the narrators and be like, okay, this is a little bit more of a serious conversation. This is more of a serious scene. This is more lighthearted, so you can use lighthearted tones. So it's like the author will guide the narration of the audiobook so that you can hear when something is a little bit more serious or a little bit more lighthearted, or maybe some character is not telling the full truth, you know? So it's that kind of a deal. So that's why I think in some ways audiobooks are better, because you can hear certain intonations and certain patterns of speech and vocals and stuff like that. So like I said at the beginning of this video, I do not think that this video will actually end the audiobooks aren't reading discussion, but hopefully it does add to the audiobooks are reading side of the argument and the discussion, because they are at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, you're taking the same information. I took in, when reading The Bog Queen, I took in the same information listening to the audiobook as I would have reading a physical copy or an ebook. So at the end of the day, you're still taking in the same information. So that is the end of this video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the description. Sorry, in the comments. And again, keep this conversation civil because we're just here to talk. And like I said, you don't have to count audiobooks as reading. But you do not get to impose that onto other people. Especially, I mentioned this in the description, but you don't get to impose that onto other people, especially when the main voices are saying, especially when the majority of voices are saying audiobooks count as reading. Again, you do not have to count them for yourself. And let's keep, like I said, the discussion civil in the comments below if you want to discuss this. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.